Welcome to Voices of LTCI. Join us as we explore the evolving landscape of long-term care insurance with industry leaders and your host, Dr. Shar Hugh.
Hey everybody, I'm Shar. I'm CEO of the Helper Bees, and welcome to another episode of Voices of Long-Term Care Insurance. Today, I'm very excited to have Bruce Stahl with us. He is head of U.S. Individual Health at RGA. Bruce and I have run into each other occasionally over the last several years, always exchanged pleasantries, but haven't really dug deep. And so I think today's our opportunity. So I'm going to learn alongside everybody, all the listeners. So Bruce, really thank you for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is a great series that you're doing.
Awesome. So very first question, easy one. How did you get your start in long-term care insurance?
I touched it in a small way in the late 80s. But when I worked for a P&C company in the early 90s that sold senior health products that were mostly MedSup and LTCI, I became very intimately acquainted with it. And back then, new products or product features were the focus of the industry. And at the same time, the LTCI industry seemed intent on having a federal government endorsement. So I was at a conference, an industry conference, where almost everyone applauded when it was announced that HIPAA was adopted, setting the standards for tax-qualified plans. And I know this is debatable, but it seemed to me that following the implementation of the tax-qualified benefit triggers, product development cooled down. And other changes took place soon after, which also could have influenced product development, such as state rate stabilization laws and insurers realizing that the ultimate lapse rates they were assuming were much too high. Incidentally, the higher lapse rates they had seen during the 90s may have been in part due to some policyholders replacing their policies for those with improved benefits.
From there, how did you get to RGA? How did you get to a reinsurer? Have you always been on the reinsurance side of things?
No, actually, after that carrier, I became a consultant, and I started my own consulting firm, built it up to having a few actuaries and a compliance expert, but left there to go to another insurance company after about 7 years with my own business. And then after that, joined RGA in 2007.
Great. So I didn't know that. You've done through the full cycle. You started sort of on the carrier side, consultancy. So you're an entrepreneur, very similar to a lot of the listeners, back to a carrier and now at the reinsurance company. What is the perspective? Has it changed dramatically on the reinsurance side? I noticed from your title that you're individual health. So that seems to me perhaps you're touching on things beyond just long-term care insurance. But what is the perspective that you see as a reinsurance that might be different both as from your consultancy or from the carrier side of things?
So I think a number of reinsurers that were in the LTC business in the 80s, beginning in the 80s and then in the 90s and the early 2000s, got hurt badly with that legacy enforced business. RGA waited till 2007 to actually get into it. And so it's a different perspective than others might have. And so we're really eager to be involved in long-term care insurance. In fact, almost 100% of our business in my division is long-term care insurance. And we look to expand beyond that, but we're very careful. And we have a lot of expertise in long-term care insurance, and we like it.
Perfect segue for my next question. You've been a long career here in long-term care insurance. What keeps you within the industry? Is it just forward momentum, or are there particular areas that you really like about the complexity of long-term care insurance?
So I always felt that we were doing a good service to society, helping individuals and families to meet their financial needs in the future. And that's really kept me going.
Do you find being on the reinsurance side of things that you still feel that connectivity? Because I've had other guests on that say what's really important is, especially as actuaries, you're looking at numbers and you're looking at large numbers, you're looking at financial figures, but like there's a connection behind each of those numbers, which is an impactful story, an impactful life. Have you been able to maintain that culture over at RGA to say that you're empowering this, you're enabling this, sometimes behind the scenes and many times perhaps behind the scenes, but how have you been able to maintain that culture over there within your own organization?
So I think it's real key to keep our team reminded of that vision that we're helping individuals and families. Obviously, as you're alluding to, we're a step removed even from those people who producers think are a step removed, right?
Yeah.
Producers think people in the home office are not close enough to the consumer, and we're even beyond that. So it's really important for us to remind our team that we are actually helping our clients help individuals and families meet their future financial needs. It's something I set before them quite often.
That's wonderful. Which, I mean, gives me a lot of hope because in your introduction, you talked about RGA, and how you're big believers in long-term care insurance. How do you guys, is your perspective on long-term care insurance, has it evolved over time? You said you're fairly, I'm putting words in your mouth, but it feels like you think that it's fairly bullish about sort of the prospects of long-term care insurance. Where do you see the role of the reinsurer, and perhaps even specifically RGA, but you can speak broadly if you'd like.
Yeah, well, I think I need to speak specifically to RGA because RGA only got into the business in 2007 because it was finally comfortable with the premium rate structure. And even then, obviously, we're seeing premium rate increases on a fair amount of our business issued back, around 2007 to 2012. That was really key to getting into the business, and still is, that the business is guaranteed renewable. We need to have a way to mitigate against adverse experience. Thankfully, we haven't had to have really high rate increases. So it's been a good mitigant. It's been helpful to our policyholders because they're getting the increases sooner versus later. And they're not as high as what legacy blocks have had to face.
So you've painted from I think you said around the 80s to more recently as RGA has been involved. Thinking about that 2 to 2.5, 3 decades of experience, is there a particular milestone or event that's been impactful to you, specifically within the long-term care insurance? I mean, you mentioned sort of the passing of HIPAA as one, probably a large milestone. Any others that resound with you?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I also mentioned rate stability regulations. But for me personally, I think the milestones were getting to have my own consulting firm and also joining RGA in 2007 to help my predecessor, Wayne Adams, build our division. And it's been built, as I said, all on new business issues. If I were to focus on something fun, something memorable for me personally, when I was, if you're okay with me.
Oh, absolutely. I love it. Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah. Okay. While I was consulting at the age of 40, long before I came to RGA, I was asked to price a single premium policy. And in the process, I compared my modeled results to other policies in the market. And I found that one single premium policy was about a third the price of the others. So I wondered how this might have happened. And I placed the lapses back into my pricing model, and my price dropped to about a third. So it appeared to me that the pricing actuary forgot to remove the lapse assumptions when pricing the single premium. And I reacted to this information by calling my insurance agent, asking him to get licensed with the company who had underpriced the premium paying option. So my wife and I applied for the coverage soon after. But I have to say, as a Christian, I realized that I was not acting according to my faith in Christ, and that I ought to help the company rather than take advantage of it. So while our application was in underwriting, I took the company's actuary to dinner and told him he should return my application. Needless to say, the actuary was concerned about the information I gave him. He left the dinner and he planned to speak to the pricing actuary. The pricing actuary later responded that he knew the option was underpriced by itself, but that the entire portfolio of the policy's benefit and premium options was priced adequately. The company ended up issuing the policy to my wife and me. They waited another 6 months to fix the pricing on the single premium option by introducing a new generation of products. I think this story offers some interesting thoughts about professionalism and also points to the need for strong process and assumption controls on pricing complex products like LTC.
That's great. Do you still have that policy, if I might ask?
I sure do.
That's great.
It's a really good one, too.
And did it generate any business for your consultancy?
It didn't. Yeah, they had their own clients. So I wasn't meeting with them for dinner for that purpose, although it would have been nice if
Certainly.
it happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a good question that's on top of mind when you're telling the story. I mean, it's phenomenal living by a code of values, a code of ethics, and delivering integrity, even in business, or especially in business, perhaps. We have a lot of innovators that listen, a lot of small companies like ours. Do you have any words of wisdom for them? I mean, I can pick out a few nuggets just from that story alone, but now where you sit at RGA, I'm sure you're getting pitched and taking the coffee and dinners yourself from folks like me and others. Any words of wisdom for us?
You know, I try to be very honest and transparent, and I think it's good to be that way. Maybe I'll just leave it with that.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think even what you were saying from your story, I mean, I think we learned early on that there's a long game here. It is called long-term care insurance. And I think that over embellishing early on might get you an initial pilot agreement or a small deal initially, but we try to foster long-term relationships with our partners, and we really do view it as partners. We call that internally our customers, not as clients, we call them partners, and so that pervades our entire organization. So speaking to your story around integrity, I think that's really important, realizing that you have to be honest up front, because you might be surprised with what they might say on the other side. And we've certainly done that with some of our partners, of saying, hey, we don't have this capability, or this particular program didn't hit the mark. And I've been really pleasantly surprised with the humanity being delivered on the other side of things.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, let's broaden it a little bit. So you've had a great career. Continue to. You gave just a quick lesson for those innovating in the industry. What about more broadly? What about just professional expertise or professional experience and advice that you've been given that you live by? Anything that's noteworthy?
So, yeah, I do have a couple of things that I would point out. One is recognize when you need to rely on experts. Many years ago, again, before I came to RGA, I had a professional difference where I ended up being designated as a whistleblower under Sarbanes-Oxley. And in order to protect myself and my actuarial team, I realized that I needed an experienced corporate attorney who could successfully walk me through the process. The attorney I chose had typically worked on behalf of the board of directors rather than on behalf of the whistleblower, but she knew what the board and executives would be looking for. And this attorney knew I was protecting my actuarial team, but she also asked me whether I also wanted to protect the executive team of which I was a part. And this was a great question. I didn't have to think twice about the answer. Of course, I wanted to protect the management team. So the attorney was able to offer me a broader perspective, first because she had experience in such matters, and second because she was not emotionally involved in the matter herself. So she provided guidance on how to communicate with the various parties. In the end, I found I was on good terms with the president of the company as well as with my peers. And even the general counsel of that company watched out for my team's welfare. So again, recognize when you need to rely on experts. Very, very valuable. The other lesson that I would say is identify what's entailed in leadership and execute on it. I considered some years back what it meant to be a leader, and I came up with an acrostic: LEADS, LEADS. L stands for love communication. E stands for embrace the same expectations you have of those you lead, which is basically setting an example. A is advance the cause of those you lead, helping them do their jobs. D is deliver a culture of growth. And that is heavily saying, give them room to fail. And then S, just as important as the others, even though it's at the end, S is setting a vision, set a vision. And by following these, I think it's helped me in my leadership of RGA's U.S. individual health team.
That's great. It's hitting me at a particularly good, important time as we think about quarterly and annual planning, especially around expectation setting. So thank you for that. On the S, though, I'm curious. Don't share anything that you can't, but I am curious about what is the vision? What is for RGA?
It's what we were saying before. I always bring before my team that we're here to help our clients, help individuals and families take care of their future financial needs. Every opportunity I get, I bring that out.
That's great.
That's our vision.
Yeah, consistency and communication is really important. Which leads me to, how do you see the industry as we're evolving to satisfy that mission? There's a lot of innovation. There's been a lot of change from digitization to now, wellness, which is really the topic on everybody's mind. What are the areas of innovation and change that you think are particularly important for our industry, and how do you think it might affect us?
I think what I'll say is that even though the LTCI industry has moved away from traditional standalone products to combination or hybrid products, I still think that standalone products have an important role, and particularly in the middle market. They could fill in a position in a marketplace that has yet to figure out how to successfully help this large population plan for their financial needs. At RGA, we have encountered multiple firms who are interested in developing products that are more affordable than traditional LTCI and yet still provide important protection to assist in the care of the elderly. I think that the new products are going to have to plan on new care innovations, including administration of the care, such as we find with helper bees. I think that they may also need to figure out ways to underwrite applications less expensively and in a faster time. There's a huge need. And I expect that some reimagined version of traditional LTCI can help to accommodate that need. So I hope that regulators will work along with us as we do this. And I think there are at least some regulators who have enthusiasm for that. But I also think the Medicaid eligibility rules are a major impediment to any growth in selling LTCI to the middle market. And I think the federal and state governments need to recognize that if they're serious about reducing the Medicaid budgets. Many people assume that Medicaid will pay the cost of their care, even though it's supposed to be a welfare program. But regardless of this often misunderstood program, there are many who would like to insure the risks they face should they or a loved one need care. And our industry is working toward developing products that are affordable while still providing a reasonable level of financial support. RGA, as a reinsurer, wants to work with insurers and producers to develop meaningful policies. Around 6 or 7 years ago, we set up a product development team for our division, which was to consider what types of product design might be palatable to insurers, while at the same time satisfy a need felt by potential consumers of care. And we came up with something unusual, which we call caregiver insurance. The name is perhaps a bit vague, but it's a decreasing term LTC policy that helps children with jobs and careers to cover care for their parents until the child retires and is able to provide more personal care for their parents. It's something we described in an article back in 2020, so it's public, but it illustrates that affordable products are going to help, but not eliminate the full risk associated with the need for care.
I had heard of the caregiver insurance. It's interesting to think about caregiving in my side of the world where we're dealing with older adults or their family members or the caregivers who are dealing with issues currently. We think about it from the service delivery side. It's great to hear that you and others are tackling it from the financial side to give financial wellness and well-being to families who are currently actively going through it, which is probably going to be one of our society's largest challenge. Well, just sort of in parting, is there anything that you want to cover that you want to impart on the audience, either as an industry as a whole or what RGA is doing or the caregiving industry really more broadly?
Just to emphasize again how much of a need there is for all of us to work together to make insurance protection available to all these people.
Well, thanks for that reminder, Bruce. Thanks for all you've done for the industry and what you continue to do. It's really exciting to hear sort of your perspective on the standalone products and sort of the vigor behind it and the belief that you have, given your long career. That means quite a bit. So again, and thank you for being on the podcast.
And thank you for having me. I appreciate it.